Okay, let's talk about virtual reality. First of all, virtual reality is basically the ability to walk through a completely rendered environment of your model. And this one is actually really easy. You just go to the online cloud rendering interface for Revit and select Render as a Stereo Panorama. It's that easy. When you do that, you can, like other renderings, you can have settings to get the highest quality, which of course you do. And this is what it looks like. It's the fully rendered space. However, the big difference is that there's this QR code over here on the lower left, which you can scan with your phone or iPad. And the way you know it's done, this is actually the icon preview for Google Cardboard. So as you're trolling around the internet, you often see that, or not often, but you occasionally see that image, which means it's a 3D virtual reality image. Anyway, what that does is create a stereo panorama. So it's basically the same view, slightly off from one eye to the next. And when you put this in a Google Cardboard viewer, it recreates the sort of effect of being in a 3D space. It's actually pretty cool. You need to take a shot of your phone. I think iPhones are a little easier. I have an Android, so I actually used another camera with my fourth hand to get the screenshot because I couldn't get it to work with my fingers. And you'll need to take a screenshot somehow. Using the Android phone is probably the most complicated because they're the least consistent. So these are the directions here. You can follow them depending on your device. So virtual reality is a pretty easy way, and we'll explore those in class during the presentation. So when you present your board, you'll have your virtual reality and augmented reality views. Augmented reality is where you take a view through your camera, and you can place your model in that camera view. And the first thing you need to know about augmented reality is that it uses file formats. There are a number of different file formats that are out there. 3D objects can generally be converted into what's called the OBJ file format. It actually stands for object, and that is the one that we want to use, and it's actually a fairly flexible format for creating different types of 3D things, including 3D printing. There are a number of other 3D formats, including stereo lithography, STL, which will be acceptable. Sometimes you use interstitial formats. You convert the file to one format and then convert it into OBJ. FBX, which is a film box format, is one of those. Sometimes DWG or SKP are used. Those are AutoCAD and SketchUp, respectively. Anyway, method number one is a little complicated, especially if you don't have the software on your computer. But you take your conceptual mass, you load it into a Revit model and a Revit project, and then put it in the 3D axonometric view, the little default 3D view, and then choose from the program menu Export FBX. You can then open that export in 3ds Max and click on the imported model, or import the model in 3ds Max, and then you can just choose Export OBJ. You don't actually have to even do anything in 3ds Max. You just have to export it. And here's the 3ds Max window, and it's you're basically, your model comes in. All you have to do is click on it with the left mouse button, and it turns green, and that means you have it selected, and then you just choose Export Selected. When you do choose Export Selected, what you'll see, this is typical of export menus. There's a lot of options, including 3ds Max, DWG, and OBJ. That's the one that we want. And many of these programs can import different file formats as well. Method two, a little easier, but it does also require installing software on your computer. And this, you can go to this exporter plugin. Here, let me just go and show you what that looks like on the internet here. Oh, here's my online view of my model, by the way. SimLab is the company that makes the exporter, and you can get that and get 15 free trials if you want. Anyway, from that, then you just have a plugin in your menu. You have a plugin menu which allows you to export the model pretty simply. And let me just show you what that looks like in Revit. So here I am in a Revit project with my model, conceptual mass. Normally you would go to Export FBX. Okay. In this case, because I've installed this add-in, and Revit actually has a whole app store that you can get goodies. There's a button here I can just click to export the file, and it saves it in the correct format. All right. Now we've got it exported. What do we do? Well, we load it into Augment, and I have the link on Canvas along with my login information. So what I'll do is you'll all log in and with my login information, and you can load your model right in there. You're welcome to install Augment onto your device as long as it's an Android or iPhone or iPad or Android tablet, and then you can view your model through the camera. And here's my model in my living room. Lovely. And to move it around, you just click and drag on it with one finger. To scale it, you spread your fingers, and to either apart or together to make it bigger or smaller, and then you rotate 2 fingers to spin the object if it has a front or a back face. And here's another view of it. Again, there's my daughter. She can't see it, but I can. It's in the middle of the room. And you can actually walk around it with the Augment viewer running in your camera. So it's pretty cool. The only disadvantage is that if you, say, wanted your model to be in St. Mark's Square, we don't have that ability to to put it in there, although I think there is the ability to put a photo in there. So you'll have to basically choose somewhere on the Endicott campus that works for you. You can, of course, look out on the ocean and have it be out on the ocean. And you can also do it interior, inside a building. And obviously we'll have to just make do with what we've got. Anyway, back in the physical world, we do have to put all this stuff onto a board. And just a little bit of advice. Much of it you probably either do consciously or instinctively. Things about margins and being consistent with your margins. But one thing I'd like you to also consider are things like the reading order of your project, and that's both how you're going to present, but also visually how you read the board, how you graphically track across it. Also the balance of the board, light and dark, and also whether or not there are focal points or a focal point. And a lot of this you can tell by looking at the negative space. Let's look at that first. I just did a inverted black and white image of an old thesis board, and you can see that the black and white images, you can see that there's obviously a very heavy kind of square of images that reads quite strongly, particularly in the black background image. On the other hand, some of those drawings I actually like more with the white lines on black background. So, for example, the section drawing I think would look better inverted like this. You can also check to see if there are kind of groupings that make things block together. This will give you a cue as to how people are going to read your drawing, read your whole board. Again, there's often this kind of gestalt thing that happens. We read the board. We don't always follow along with your hand as you're pointing to things. So figuring out if there are any blocking arrangements that are working or are working against what you are trying to achieve in your presentation. Finally, thinking about what order both you are presenting and what order people are seeing your board. In this case, the student presented with the leftmost instance of her board, which is kind of starting with the pre-design and making her way through schematics and rendered images and all that kind of stuff. How I think people kind of saw the board, they were drawn to this center image because it was sort of squeezed in between 2 big blocks that were really a little too heavy to kind of absorb all at once. And that's why I felt like that section image was just not strong enough. And also I tended to read out from that And then the last piece that I looked at was kind of the bottom bar leading up the side. What her intent was to actually have these kind of horizontal right to left bands. Now, and whenever you do that, you really have to make them strongly emphasized, because we do tend to read left to right. And you can tell from her titles that that's actually what she was trying to achieve. But I think the weight of the images didn't quite achieve that design like she was hoping for. Anyway, there's a whole shopping list that is on the syllabus that you're welcome to look at, and probably would be a good idea. The one piece that you're going to be missing is the 3D printed model. And this can be a small board, and there's a number of pieces which we've talked about, and of course, hopefully you have already done your hand sketch where you expect the design to be with entourage and annotation. Anyway, there's at least 3 different iterations of your model, so you should save your model as you work on it in Revit, at least in 3 different stages, so that we can see how it developed. And that may be from the, drawing a cube first, and then saving that view, and then additional views. Anyway, and there's a number of other elements, including a photo of the final model, which, if we're lucky, we'll get some high-quality photos out of the photo lab. So for next class, what I'd like you to do, lay out your board. If you're missing some images, for example, the VR or AR, just use placeholders. And upload a copy to Canvas, but also why don't you just print it out in black and white on 11 by 17, and we can kind of look at it and see if we can do some meta-analysis of what the board is saying, and what the different image types are saying if you have them. So for next week, don't forget you need to listen to another lecture, number 4, which is on 3D printing.